Hello everyone, my name is Jumbo Commander, and today we have a new deck tech from Hour of Devastation, the Locust God. The Locust God is anticipated by so many Commander players because it's awesome. 4 blue-red for a legendary creature God. It's a 4/4 flyer that says whenever you draw a card, create a 1/1 blue and red insect creature token with flying and haste. That means that with every card you draw, you're going to get insect and insect and insect and insect, and they're going to be able to attack the turn they come into play. I can see the deck being built right now. Very powerful. Let's look at the next ability. 2 blue-red, draw a card, then discard a card. An overpriced loot is just gravy. Awesome, Locust God. Thank you. And then, of course, he dodges the commander tax a little bit by going back to your hand at the beginning of the next end step if he ever dies. So let's jump right into the Locust God and create a deck based around him. And one of the best things is that a deck based around him is all about draw. Draw, 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 all the draws. Just keep drawing. Arjun, the Shifting Flame. This card mind moils. Oh, look at that. There's a mind moil right next to it. Whenever you play a spell, you put the cards in your hand on the bottom of your library in any order and draw that many cards. So every spell you play, you're recycling your hand, which makes it really difficult to plan out your turns, but it just means you end up cycling through your deck like crazy. And that will create so many tokens. We have more cards that set up recurring card engines. How about Teferi's Puzzle Box, which basically says during your draw step, you draw a card, but don't get too attached to that card because then you'll take your entire hand and put it on the bottom of your library and draw that many cards. But just think about all the card draw that just happened there, creating a bunch of locusts, even though it's hard to predict what you're going to do during your next turn. Monastery Siege is also a permanent that lets you draw multiple cards and then throw one in the graveyard. Jace's Archivist is a windfall effect on a creature with a very cheap activated ability. And Forgotten Creation provides us a trigger every turn where we can discard our hand and draw that many cards. So notice these 5 cards that I just mentioned are permanents that create permanent card advantage. Yes, they might have specific triggers or specific conditions, but you can basically draw multiple cards turn after turn after turn. I got a few more, like Consecrated Sphinx. I don't have to convince you how good Consecrated Sphinx is. Let's go to Magical Christmas Land. Let's pretend we have a Sphinx and a Locust God on the battlefield, and I cast Wheel of Fortune. So we discard our hand and then I draw 7 cards, but then all of my opponents drew 7 cards, so I'll draw 14 cards for each opponent I have. That's a dead opponent right there. Now I know a lot of things have to go perfectly in that scenario I presented, but Consecrated Sphinx is just a great card. Just imagine you just don't have a Wheel of Fortune and, I don't know, you draw 2 cards on their turn, get a 2 locusts, draw 2 more cards, get 2 locusts. You have a little army of locusts, plus you're gonna draw into something really good. It's just a great card. And as long as we're drawing cards off of drawing cards, how about Elhemerit's Archive? You basically draw twice the cards that you would normally. So if you were to draw 2 cards with Consecrated Sphinx, no, you draw 4 cards. If we have a deck built around drawing cards, let's double it up. And this card is 2 mana cheaper and easier to cast than Thought Reflection. There are a few more effects like Rhystic Study or Mystic Remora, which lets you draw as you tax and slow down your opponents. So all of these permanents give us crazy card advantage that we can drop once and then just keep utilizing over and over again. But I want to focus on some of the one-off card draw spells because they can be very powerful too. I want to look at the wheel effects with Chandra. Chandra, show us the wheel effects. Well, Chandra Flamecolor's middle ability says, discard all the cards in your hand, then draw that many cards plus 1. That's why Chandra is in charge of our wheel category. Oh, Chandra, you're so great. Wheel of Fortune may be the namesake for this category, but it doesn't stand up to 2 amazing wheel effects, Time Spiral and Memory Jar. What makes these 2 effects so powerful is that you can kinda play them for free. Let me explain. If you invest 6 mana in Time Spiral, you get a full new grip of cards, but then you untap 6 lands. So you will have all those cards, and hopefully all those locusts, and then you can start deploying cards that make your locust threatening, or drawing into more cards. Memory Jar lets you pay for your wheel effect in installments. Yes, you're going to sink 5 mana, which is a lot, into it at one point in time, but the turn that you're going off, you're not paying any mana, you're just activating the artifact you already invested in. Because what we want to do is do a lot of card draw in a single turn, get all those hasty locusts, and then buff them up in a way that we can kill our opponents in one quick burst. I mean, obviously, if our opponents let us, we'll take tons of turns and draw all the cards and kill them over time with a bajillion locusts. But we have to expect that they'll have some disruption for us, so we'll need to be able to win in a single turn. Now, there are so many wheel effects in this game. Windfall, Wheel of Fortune, Reforge the Soul, Winds of Change, Tolarian Winds, the not commit, but to memory, the memory part. Especially, that's a nice little discount wheel effect, even though it's kind of overcosted at 6 mana. And there's so many more too. So just go ahead and pick your favorites. Like, for example, Windfall is pretty cheap. Same thing with Commit to Memory. Wheel of Fortune is kind of expensive, and you can pick and choose and have the right cards fit your budget. There are also a few creatures that have Windfall effects on them. Whirlpool Warrior, Whirlpool Drake, and Whirlpool Rider. So now we've left the wheel effects, and now we're moving on to Jace, because Jace is going to help us brainstorm. And that's because Jace the Mind Sculptor is just a brainstorm on a Planeswalker. You zero his ability, and then you draw 3 cards, and then you put 2 cards back on top of your library. This brainstorm effect is insane, named for actual brainstorm. Because you draw 3 cards, you'll get 3 locusts, and then who cares what 2 you put back. This also works incredibly well with all those wheel effects we want, because normally we would throw all those cards away and draw a whole new set of cards. Well, with a brainstorm, you can take the cards you want in your next hand and stack them on top of your library. Then you can cast your wheel effect and draw into the cards you wanted to keep. I also put Sensei's Divining Top in this category. I know it doesn't actually brainstorm, and this kind of transitions us into what else Jace does. Jace in general is just great at drawing cards. I'm thinking Jace's Ingenuity. I mean, Jace is drawing cards all over the place, so he can just represent good value. And that's what Sensei's Divining Top is. Every single turn for 1 mana, you could just draw a card and get a free locust. And Sensei's Divining Top can also help set up some of these draws. Speaking of just really good draw spells, how about Treasure Cruise or Recurring Insight, or even Enter the Infinite? If we want to draw our entire deck and then suddenly have like 60 locusts, I think you need a way to cheat this into play or cheat your mana cost, because I don't think we're getting up to 12 mana very often in this deck. I mean, we do really want a lot of mana, because we got to get a 6 mana general out and then start wheeling. Okay, but Enter the Infinite is just way too much. But we should just put it in because it's I could draw my entire deck. Never mind. Moving on. I mentioned Jace's Ingenuity. That's not a card I really want in this deck, but what I would like is Mystic Confluence, because it's a counter spell and a controlling spell that can answer problematic creatures, but then also can be a draw spell. So it has the flexibility to be able to fit into this deck really nicely. And same thing with a card like Arcane Denial, a really fantastic counter spell. Not only because it lets you draw a card and create a locus, but also because it's a very political counterspell. People aren't as upset when they get countered with Arcane Denial, because you're like, look, you can draw 2 cards. Like, you're fine. You just couldn't have that toy. I'm going to give you some cards instead. And people are kind of like, yeah, okay. And you don't really make enemies with this type of counterspell. All right, we're done with all the Jace value. Let's move on to a different Planeswalker to teach us something about card draw. How about Dak Faden, the greatest thief in the multiverse, teaching us how to loot. So Dak Faden has his plus ability, meaning loot, and also the minus ability, which basically reads Steal a Soul Ring, which I like a lot. But then Jace Vryn's Prodigy comes in and says, I'm a Planeswalker, and I know how to loot as well. No, Jace. No, you've had your turn. No, Jace Vryn's Prodigy is really good, because he'll flip over really easily, and then you can flash back all of these great wheel effects. Yeah, like Jace Vryn's Prodigy, like, you're great in this deck. Please, come in. But we're going to learn about looting. Some of the best looting effects are Frantic Search, because just like Time Spiral, you can draw your cards, but then untap your mana, and that gives you forward momentum as you kind of try to get as many locusts and win conditions on the battlefield at once. I also like Faithless Looting, not only because it's a cheap looting ability, but also you can just chuck it into your graveyard as you wheel or as you mill or as you discard it to another loot effect and then flash it back later on. There's also Compulsive Research, which is just a solid card draw spell, and even if you're drawing 3 and discarding 2, that's fine. You're still even on cards. Great job. And you can also get a loot effect from a land called Cephalid Colosseum. Now there's a little bit of hoops you have to jump through. It does deal you a little bit of damage, but that's fine because you can essentially gain some locusts later on in the game when you really desperately need them. Just like all those wheel effects and all these other card draw effects, there are a ton of looting effects. I'm just going to name a handful. Cathartic Reunion, Ideas Unbound, Careful Consideration, Oath of Jace, Thought Flare, Pull from Tomorrow, and actually Pull from Tomorrow isn't even that much of a loot. It's only really a loot if you cast it for 3. Pull from Tomorrow can just be an insane mana sink. And so you can see a lot of these cards are kind of weird and interesting, and there's so many card draw spells in Magic, you can kind of pick and choose what you want to add to this deck, just like those wheel effects I mentioned. Consider budget, consider what cards you have in your own binders at home. All you need is a Locust God and the desire to draw cards. That's awesome. All right, representing the next category of card draw, we have Thibault. Random card draw. Thibault's +1 ability says draw a card, then discard a card at random. If there's a deck to have Thibault in, it might be this deck. 2 cards that sort of represent Thibault. Control of the Court and Goblin Lore. For just 2 mana, you can draw 4 cards. Yes, you have to discard 3 at random, but you're drawing cards. You're making locusts. Okay. This Thibault category is kind of a joke. Let's move on to something way better, which is represented by Tamiyo. It's Conditional Creature Draw. And the reason why Tamiyo represents this is because her -2 is insane. Draw a card for each tapped creature target player controls. So you can attack with a bajillion locusts and then draw a card for each locust. Yes, Tamiyo. Yes. And so that's what this category is all about. It's using your creatures that you already have to help you draw cards. So for example, Shared Discovery is 1 blue mana for drawing 3 cards. Wait a second, you say. That's a sorcery speed Ancestral Recall. As an additional cost to cast it, you have to tap 4 untapped creatures. But we plan on having locusts all over the place. So yeah, let's go ahead and cast our weird Ancestral Recall. That's awesome. Okay, but what might actually generate more card draw is Distant Melody. 3 and a blue, choose a creature type. I choose locusts. Okay, draw a card for each permanent you control of that type. So if you have like 7, 10, 14 on the board, you just double up all your locusts with an awesome Distant Memory. These locusts are really good fodder for drawing more cards with a card like Skull Clamp. I'm sure you've seen Skull Clamp before. You kill your locusts and then you draw 2 cards, creating 2 more locusts. Throw it in Ashnod's Altar and you got yourselves a combo. You can use a Trinket Mage to get this Skull Clamp out of your deck. I'm telling you, Skull Clamp's great anyways. It just belongs in this deck. But let's look at a few other pieces of conditional creature draw with Deep Fathom Skulker, Bident of Thassa, and Coastal Piracy. Whenever your little locusts contact your opponent, whenever they, I don't know, what sound does an attacking locust make? It's like, okay, whenever they your opponents, you get to draw a card. That's amazing. And so you're essentially going to double up your locusts every single time they connect. And let's also throw in a Wind Reader Sphinx, because then whenever they attack, you'll then create a whole new realm of locusts. And so this can give us the forward momentum to keep making more locusts and more locusts and more locusts. Although just hitting your opponent with 1/1s doesn't really win the game that well. So let's talk about how we weaponize our card draw and really use these locusts to kill our opponents. Well, the first thing that we can do is literally deal damage when we draw cards, like Psychosis Crawler, Niv-Mizzet of the Firemind. These are classic cards, and Niv-Mizzet is a really great Izzet general in his own right. There's some easy includes. Let's talk about another great general that can belong in this deck, Purphoros, God of the Forge. So every time you draw a card, now you create a locust and deal 2 damage. Let's also not forget Purphoros' Hidden Mode, which is still really good. You can pay 3 mana, 2 and a red, to give your creatures +1/+0 until end of turn. I know we all fixate on the 2 damage, but that anthem that's repeatable is game-ending. You can also add Impact Tremors or Goblin Bombardment, and then when you draw a card, you deal 1 damage with Impact Tremors, or you can just sacrifice that Locust to Goblin Bombardment and deal another damage. There's also a sorcery like Burn at the Stake. For 5 mana, you can tap any number of creatures that you control. Hopefully we're controlling a lot. And then it deals damage equal to 3 times the number of creatures you tap this way. That's a lot of potential damage, but it's also a lot of setup cost. This is a way that we can kind of force through damage when we don't have an easy way of attacking. But attacking is, really great and fun. So if we have an insect, we might as well attack. And if we have, 10 insects, why don't we cast Shared Animosity and make them gigantic? Or Coat of Arms and attack with huge insects. These multiplying effects can just be insane. And do you know how easy it is to time spiral, untap all your lands, and then play a Coat of Arms? Easy. It's easy. Or Shared Animosity is only 3 mana. You Wheel of Fortune, and then you Wheel of Fortune again, and then you're like, oh, Shared Animosity. You drop it, and then you just destroy your opponent. This is how you just win games out of the blue, and it's the haste on these insects that does it. Now, your Locust God is going to have a big target on its head, so you might want to gain a little bit of token redundancy in your deck. How about Chasm Skulker? This is just a great card on its own because he can get huge too as we keep drawing more cards. But then there's the insurance plan of creating little squids when Chasm Skulker dies, and then we can use Coat of Arms and Shared Animosity with the little squids to get a ton of damage in. We could also kind of go Spells Matter with Young Pyromancer and create a lot of elementals too. Speaking of creatures, we can add a few creatures to sort of enhance the Spells Matter theme. How about Bedlam Reveler? This is a creature that lets us draw cards and is super cheap after we wheel a few times. Or Baral, which makes our spells cheaper. And we can even add a few counter spells in there to kind of give Baral its own looting effect, and then that can generate locusts. Pretty nice. A few other creatures that are just solid: Snapcaster Mage, Torrential Gearhulk, flashing back some great spells. Diluvian Primordial, you can cast your opponent's spells because when you Wheel of Fortune, then you have access to whatever they've discarded from their hand, and sometimes, they can discard some pretty awesome expensive spells. Goblin Dark Dwellers can flash back some of these critical wheel effects or card draw effects too. And if you don't want to have creatures so much, you can use spells to get some of these same effects. How about Mizzix's Mastery to access your graveyard, or Past in Flames, or Mystic Retrieval? Now, the reason why we want access to our graveyard is because we're going to be casting wheel effects, the Winds of Change, the Wheel of Fortune, and we will be discarding cards that actually we want to play that are pretty good. And so being able to access those cards in our graveyard with a Flip Jace or a Snapcaster or a Past in Flames or a Mystic Retrieval gives us a lot more advantage. We have all this card draw, and so you feel like we should be up on cards, but many of the spells we have actually make us lose some card advantage. Like if we Frantic Search, we're spending a card to draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards. So we're just down a card. We've essentially filtered. Same thing goes with like a Winds of Change. We spend the Winds of Change and then we discard our hand and draw that many cards, but we've spent a card in order to replace the rest of our hand. We're still down a card. So having access to these cards that we've carelessly thrown in the graveyard can give our deck some real lasting power. And speaking of which, I actually think we need a little bit of power because this deck has some inherent weaknesses in it. Let's say our opponent plays a Sandworm Convergence. A what now? Yeah, a Sandworm Convergence. Flying creatures can't attack. All my locusts fly and my commander flies. Okay. Now, of course, you're like, okay, I'll go get my Perforos, or I'll go get my Niv Mizzet the Firemind and my Psychosis Crawler. This deck is not dead to Sandworm Convergence or, another effect. But it certainly doesn't help, so let's take a look at some other effects that can essentially save us from the disruption and the weakness of having a deck that's so focused on just attacking and drawing and attacking and drawing. we take a look at some combo potential with the Locust God. Because the Locust God has a very key ability that we just overlooked, but is amazing. This 2 blue red, draw a card, discard a card. Everyone's like, it's a bad loot, so what? I don't care about that. Okay. This is a mana sink that lets you go through your entire deck. That is so combo centric. That is full of combo potential. All you have to be able to do is produce infinite mana, and suddenly you've cycled through your entire deck. That's powerful. So let me introduce you to a few combos. There are a lot of combos out there, and if you're interested in them, we can talk about them later. You guys can leave your favorite combo in the comments, but I'm just going to show you a few. One of them is called Dramatic Scepter. Here are the pieces you need. You need an Isochron Scepter, a Dramatic Reversal, and a Gilded Lotus. Actually, the only thing that's really required is the Isochron Scepter and the Dramatic Reversal. The Gilded Lotus is replaceable. You could have a Soul Ring and Izzet Signet, whatever. Okay, so you imprint Dramatic Reversal on the Isochron Scepter, you pay 2, and then Dramatic Reversal says, hey, untap everything, and that includes the Isochron Scepter. Now wait a second, you say, you invested 2 mana. That's why you need the Gilded Lotus, or any combination of non-land permanents that can produce more than 2 mana. Also, it needs to be able to produce colored mana, so blue and red, in order to use that mana for your Locust God draws. You can't just have a Soul Ring and a Grim Monolith, because you don't have the right colors. That's it. And then you've gone infinite. You can just simply draw out your whole deck. Now you might ask, what does that accomplish if I draw out my whole deck? Well, you will have infinite mana, so as you draw out your whole deck, you can play all sorts of other win conditions. If you really want to, you could play a Laboratory Maniac, draw your last card, and just win the game that way. The next combo I submit to you for your enjoyment is Mana Echoes. Is pretty broken and will go infinite with all sorts of cards. So if you have a Mana Echoes in play, all you need is a critical mass of Locusts before you can go off pretty easily. It reads, whenever a creature comes into play, you may add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool for each creature you control that shares a creature type with it. All you really need to do is add that 6th Locust, and then Mana Echoes will produce 6 colorless mana. You can use 2 colorless mana, and then you can invest the other 4 into a card like Gemstone Array. Those 4 will basically turn into a blue and a red. You'll use the other 2 colorless to then draw a card with your Locust God, and then that'll produce even more mana, 7 mana, and then that's enough to put into Gemstone Array again, and then keep drawing more and more cards, and then eventually producing more and more and more mana. One of the great things about this is it actually produces exponential mana, so pretty soon you'll just have more mana than you know what to do with, and then you can start looting into cards that actually do something. And your win condition could be just about anything. Again, the Laboratory Maniac is a pretty classic finisher. The last combo that I have for you today is Polymorph into your win condition. So specifically, I'm going to focus on a card like Mass Polymorph, because you usually can't polymorph into a single card that will win you the game. Mass Polymorph says you exile all the creatures you control, then you reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal that many creature cards. Then you put every creature that you revealed straight onto the battlefield. That's pretty good. So if you have more than just a couple Locusts out, you could essentially pull every single creature out of your deck. Let's take, for example, Pilipala and Grand Architect. Well, this produces infinite mana, just the 2 of them. So basically you can create enough mana to recast your general, because you were kind of forced to exile your general if he was on the battlefield. And then you keep using your infinite mana to draw all the way out, and then again, Laboratory Maniac for the win. It's just so easy. How about we mass polymorph into a Palancron Deadeye Navigator combo, again producing infinite mana. Or, my favorite, we polymorph into Magus of the Future, Trinket Mage, and Ethereum Sculptor. The Trinket Mage goes for Sensei's Divining Top, and then you get this awesome combo where you essentially draw a card with the top. You'll create a Locust, by the way. The top goes back on top of your library, and the Magus of the Future says, hey, you want to play that card? And Ethereum Sculptor says, hey, you can play it for free, and then you just play the top for free. Tap it, draw a card, put the top on top of your library, play it again for free, and then you just keep doing that, drawing your entire deck, eventually drawing your Lab Maniac, and winning the game. And by the way, making Locusts the whole time too, it's pretty good. This one actually doesn't use infinite mana, which is kind of cool. Now, Mass Polymorph can get tons of combos straight onto the battlefield. And you might want to go combo centric and, know in your head, like, okay, I have an Argyn, I have a Psychosis Crawler, I have a Perforos, I have all these creatures. I need to get to 7 Locusts, and then I'll make sure that I get my combo out. And that's fine. But don't dismiss single sort of polymorph effects, like a Proteus Staff. You get rid of a Locust, and then you get your Argyn out of the battlefield, or you get a Niv Mizzet on the battlefield. Jalira Master Polymorphous could be even more selective because it doesn't let you hit any legendary creatures. You could have Argyn, the Dragon, and Baby Jace all in your deck, and then it would skip that and go straight to your win condition of Palancron or Deadeye Navigator, which are not legendary. You can also use just the classic polymorph. And if you're having trouble with all of these combos and the loot effects, you could just polymorph into something stupid and big like a Kozilek. That'd be pretty good too. And Kozilek is on theme because it draws cards when you cast it. And a card like Kozilek is also really nice because then you can basically loot forever. All you have to do is discard your Kozilek, and then all the cards from your graveyard get shuffled back into your library, so you can just keep looting over and over again. That has been my take on the Locust God. I think that he is very powerful, and I think he's super customizable because there's so many draw spells in Magic. So many. And a lot of people are going to go for just the best of the draw spells, and that's totally cool. I think that a lot of the decks are going to look very similar starting off, and then people are going to try and explore different avenues for making the Locust God their own. My personal way of doing it is to have a weird combo in there, and then have like an alternate way of winning. I think that'd be really cool. But you should explore the Locust God and find your own take on it. Maybe you want to enhance the token strategy. You add a Tempt with Vengeance and an Obelisk of Erd, and you just kind of go big that way. Maybe you want to go more Spells Matter, and you have a Storm package that'll let you storm off, and then you empty the Warrens as an additional aspect of your token strategy. I mean, there's so many cool combos because the whole basis of this deck is card draw. And card draw is just a key factor in Commander. And so you have a deck that already is forcing you to do something you want to do. Now, one thing I want to counsel everyone who's building the Locust God is to make sure that you have a tremendous amount of mana ramp in this deck. You're going to want to just jam so many card draw spells in there, and that's fine because the card draw will get you to your land drops and your mana ramp, but you also really want to hit that because your commander is a critical piece of this puzzle, and it costs 6 mana. And I know if he dies, you can still cast it for 6 mana, but there's going to be some disruption in this world. And so if you don't have the mana ramp to get him out fast and keep getting him out and keep drawing cards, keep that forward momentum, you're going to be miserable with this deck. So make sure you have enough mana ramp to support this strategy. All right, everyone, that has been my take on the Locust God. My name is Jumbo Commander, and I do all sorts of Commander content. If you like this deck tech, please let me know by hitting the like button. That's the thumbs up thing that's under the video on the right. Not like the far, far right, because that's the thumbs down, but the thumbs up, it looks like your hand and your own thumb. Okay, I've rambled enough. I just really like Commander. I'll see you guys soon. Thanks all.